Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dancing Sober podcast. I'm so glad that you're still here with us, listening to us. I appreciate you so much. I want to give a big shout out to our studio sponsor. Thank you to Espacio 1839 for allowing us to do the podcast in here. Please visit espacio1839.com to order stuff online, or you could also visit them in person at 1839 East 1st Street in Boyle Heights. Come check it out. Come get some books, get some t-shirts, and say hi. Let's also give a shout out to Pavel Acevedo for this dope shirt. Thank you, Pavel, for supplying us with the wardrobe for today. If you want to look up Pavel, go to his Instagram at Pavel_Acevedo on Instagram. And without further ado, today's guest is none other than Alvaro Marquez. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dancing Sober podcast, where your favorite mediocre host is here. And we put all of our effort into bringing you the best guests, and this week is no exception to that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast, Alvaro Marquez.
Thank you so much for having me here, Rafa.
How are you, brother?
I'm good, dude. You know, life throwing punches, but you got to roll with them.
Duck, swing.
Yeah, I gotta learn how to dodge them a little bit better.
Yeah.
Take the punches right in the chin.
I think that's what roll with the punches means, no? Like you get hit, you go with it, or anyways.
Yeah.
I don't know what all that means, but it's really good to have you here in the studio. Of course, we've known each other for quite some years, and you're somebody that's been on the list to be on this podcast for a while, and I'm glad that we finally got you in here.
Thank you.
And dude, congratulations on all of your recent successes. I mean, you've been really kicking ass. We'll get into that, what you're doing, because I remember when I first met you, and you were at a little table at Self-Help Graphics.
Yeah, that's where it all started.
So excitedly about your prints.
Yeah.
I remember how excited you were about your prints, and so how clear you described your stuff. But like we always start here in this podcast, is just tell us a little bit about you and where you grew up and your life and stuff like that. So
Sure. So I don't know. I'm one of these stereotypical LA transplants. I've been here 15 years now. But I grew up in the working class immigrant community of East Salinas, California, up in the Central
Salinas.
Coast. Salas. And, you know, I was born and raised there until I was 18. And when I was 18, I got into college and I got the fuck out of there.
But slow down.
Yeah, slow down.
Yeah, slow down. Like, how was it being a young Alvaro in Salinas? Like, what kind of youth did you have?
You know,
were you guys a milpas family, or did you work in the fields, or did you?
Well, I come from 3 generations of farm workers.
Yeah.
Like my great grandfather worked in the U.S.
For those that don't know, Salinas is northern, inland.
Yeah, it's like the
city.
lettuce capital of the world.
The lettuce capital of the world.
Produces
so it's agriculture.
Yeah, where I grew up, there was strawberry fields, lettuce fields, broccoli fields. Like I grew up a few blocks from the fields. My dad worked in the fields, and I would go visit him in his lunch breaks. Like he would let me drive the tractor. Yeah. You know, it was like fucking 1 mile straight. But you know,
that's badass though. That's memories. The kind of stories I want to see. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was. You know, it was like. I think looking back, it was a really innocent upbringing because it was like a small town with big city problems. So you know, growing up in the you know, I was born in 81.
Yeah.
And by the 89, 88, Salinas was rampant with drive-bys, at least East Salinas.
Damn.
And so I remember one year growing up, there was 40 homicides in my community.
Damn, small town.
It's a small town, dude. About 170,000 people. And most of them were on the east side. So there was that element of it. But in a lot of respects, it was also really innocent upbringing. Because I had, you know, 3 generations of my family were living in Salinas when I was growing up. So I had my tios, my tias, my cousins, and we would go to the park and spend 5 hours at the park and, you know, bust open watermelons. And, of course, the tios are playing chente, getting shit-faced. But, you know, I have very fond memories growing up there.
Yeah. Do you have a big family?
My mom is 1 of 10, and my dad is 1 of 7. And my dad's the only one that came to the U.S. All his family's in Mexico.
Wow.
But my mom was one of 10, and all but 2 of them were in Salinas at one point.
Wow.
So I had an extended family.
On your mom's side, yeah.
On my mom's side. And, you know, it was like, in a lot of ways, it was a very beautiful upbringing, because I grew up in a community where if you didn't want to speak English, you didn't have to speak English. You know, I didn't learn English until I was probably first grade. And I was like a migrant ed student because my parents were farm workers. But I don't know, one of my favorite things about Salinas is that, you know, Salinas has its own little place in the Chicano movement. You know, Cesar Chavez was organizing there in the 70s. Okay. There was a lot of politicization. A lot of my high school teachers were Chicanas and Chicanos who grew up in the 60s and 70s, were politicized, went to college, and then came back to the community to teach. So I had a lot of really great mentors who were politically active. And so it was one of those things where I didn't realize how marginalized my community was until I got out of there, until I went to college and I realized how all these other people lived. It was one of those places where we were all broke. So we were all in the same boat. It was like, it was just life.
Were you a good student growing up?
I was a total nerd growing up, man. Like, you know, like I was...
That's hilarious.
I lived across the street from the local library, and because of like the gang violence, like my mom was super strict. Like I always joke, she was like the Mexican version of the Tiger Mom.
Wow.
Like super strict. Like we couldn't wear red, we couldn't wear blue, we couldn't wear baggy clothes because she thought, you know.
Was she born in Mexico? Or?
She was born in Jalisco.
Okay.
And she moved to the U.S. She moved to Salinas when she was 14 to work in the fields.
Wow.
So like. You know,
so she'd already been here for a long time. But
she had been here for a while.
Time you were big enough to deal with this.
Yeah. But like, you know, growing up, I was a total nerd. School was my refuge. You know, like I loved reading since I was a kid. Yeah. My mom would say the only place you can go outside of the apartment complex is to the library. Yeah. So that's where I would spend my days. And when I was in school, you know, like I was just like a shy little nerd who would get bullied, and, you know, like, so I would hide in the library.
I have to ask, what kind of books are you into?
Well, I mean, when I was little, you know, I don't know, my first favorite author was Roald Dahl, because of these crazy-ass fantasy books about James and the Giant Peach and kids in chocolate factories. But then once I got to like middle school, I thought I was grown up, so I started reading Anne Rice novels.
Oh shit!
I was really into.
That was about the time that the movies were out, right?
It was about the time, and I thought being a vampire was the coolest thing ever. I was like, I want to live the dark life. I want to live in the shadows. You know. Of
course. So then you kind of understood the kids that went through the Twilight phase, and.
Oh, absolutely! I was too old for that shit, but I understood it.
That's awesome. Anne Rice also wrote under another pen name. I forgot what it was, but
I forgot what it was. But I mean, you know, it was like books were my refuge, man. Yeah. And like I remember I was such a nerd that, you know, we grew up in under, you know, strict finances. You know, my dad was out of work for like 7 years because he got injured in the fields, and so it was just my mom with her limited English, you know, raising my brother and I. And I remember I begged for a fucking super C spell for like 2 years because I wanted to, you know, improve my spelling.
Explain what that is.
It was a little red tablet machine.
How old are you?
I must have been like fucking 9 years old, 10 years old. And I thought the coolest thing ever was to learn how to spell properly. You know, because I had vivid memories of not knowing English, of being in school and not knowing how to communicate. So it was one of those things where, you know, my dad was put to work when he was 12. So he would tell me, no seas burro, estudia, no seas como yo. You know, so like that was really, it's a typical immigrant narrative, like study, go to school, make something of yourself, which can be kind of problematic. But I can see that from my dad's perspective, he was just trying to give me something he didn't have access to. Yeah. So I think at a young age, like I just realized if I go to school, and since I happen to be good at school, it was just like a sense of validation. You know, that as an immigrant youth, that I could like get praise by being good at academics. You know, which again is problematic in its own way.
No, but I could see that. I mean, you have a little bit of a competitive nature, and if you're somebody that has a little bit of a competitive nature and you want to just do good at stuff, and this is what you're presented with, then you're gonna thrive in it.
You're gonna run with it.
Yeah, you're gonna run with it and be like, okay, this is what you're telling me I'm not good at. Well, let me show you what I can do with this.
Yeah, because I mean, another aspect of growing in East Salinas at the time, like Salinas has a crazy history with the Dust Bowl.
Oh yeah.
During the Dust Bowl, a lot of people from Oklahoma moved to
Well,
Salinas.
did you read
Steinbeck? Dude, fucking, we grew up reading all kinds of
Couldn't believe
Steinbeck.
that book when I read it.
East of Eden, or
Well, actually, I
Mice
only
and Men?
read Grapes of Wrath.
Grapes of Wrath.
Yeah, that's the only one I
Yeah,
read.
he was from. That's we could have a whole other podcast on Steinbeck.
Seriously
and Salinas.
though, that book taught me so much about California and the Dust Bowl history and.
Well, it was
How they're
crazy
connected.
growing up. When I grew up in the East Side, like the only white people who lived in the East Side were working class white people. But there was a racial divide. Like I had a distinct memory. My two best friends growing up, Owen and Hiram, two little white boys, right? Like
Wait, what was their names again?
Owen and Hiram.
Owen. Oh,
And like we were homies. We would like play in the playground, and like I was kind of like, as you can see, I'm ethnically ambiguous. Like I'm kind of,
I get that too.
you know what I mean? Like people think I'm freaking Middle Eastern all the time, like Armenian.
Yep.
Like I get confused for Armenian by Armenians.
Yep. I've been spoken to in Farsi when I walk into 7-Elevens, honest to God.
Yeah,
The guys that work there speak to me in Farsi.
Well, I spent like 2 months in Morocco, and people thought I was Moroccan, dude. At the time, I let my beard grow out, because my beard grows all the way to my freaking cheeks.
And it's not wrong. We do look it, and we do probably have blood from those regions from way back. And I haven't done my 23andMe, but we'll see when that comes out.
Well, I mean, like, part of my experience growing up in Salinas was, there's a reason I bring up Hiram and Owen, because, like, we were like homies, we would kick it, we would play, and one time they invited me to a birthday party at their house. And so my dad dropped me off, and my dad, fucking stereotypical Mexican with the big old bigote, the farmer hat, the cinto piteado with the big old belt buckle. I was at the party, did my thing, my dad picked me up, whatever, went home. I go to school the next week, and I'm like trying to talk to Hiram and Owen, and they're ignoring me. And I'm like tripping out, like, what's going on? And like they ignored me, until finally I was like, what's going on? Why are you ignoring me? And one of them, I don't remember which one, was like, my parents said that because you're Mexican, we can't play with you.
What?
So, and that was when I was like maybe 8 years old.
Damn.
So like that fucks with your head, because that was the first moment in my life where I realized, okay, I'm an other, but I didn't really realize it because I grew up in a homogenous community. Yeah. We were all Mexicanos. We were all like sons of immigrants or recently arrived immigrants.
Yeah.
So, it was also like, that was a painful part of feeling that marginalization at a young age.
Yeah, you were really young. I grew up in East LA, which was almost all Mexican, and I remember telling people I don't think I ever experienced racism until I was older and started going out into.
Once you leave the community.
Yeah, and I didn't know what it was. Or I didn't think that it was something that I was going to have to deal with until one day you do. But anyways, go on. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, that was like part of the experience of growing up there. It was a mixed bag. Salinas, especially back then, it was a segregated community.
Yeah.
Like East Salinas, that's where all the Mexicanos lived, and South Salinas, that's where all the white folks. That's the shit Steinbeck wrote about. All these like, all the ag business owners who have like $1 billion industries live in the other side of town, send their kids to private schools or like the fancy high school in the white side of town. So
and
like
little camps where all the immigrant farm workers used to.
Yeah, it was a very, very stark divide.
Yeah.
Stark divide. And like the times that I would really see how we were racialized, because my high school was 97% Mexican, dude. 97% Mexican.
Wow.
And of course, I played sports, basketball and baseball. You go to the other high schools and you would get treated like shit, because it was all the white kids, You go to Pacific Grove, you go to Carmel, you go to Monterey, where all like the wealthy white folk live, and you get treated differently, you know. So that was like part of I think my politicization.
Yeah.
Like I grew up angry. Being like, you know, like I saw the divide.
Yeah, it's very clear in those situations.
Yeah, yeah. And it marks you. You know, it marks you. I think like it took a lot of therapy to realize my own self-worth when you grow up being made to feel less than.
That was part of the drive then too that made you work hard.
Absolutely. I was like, you know, like in the back of my mind, and this is something that took me until I was my 30s to realize a lot of my motivation growing up was to prove myself, to prove that I was worthy, right? And I think I'm now in a place in my life where I derive value from myself, not from proving myself to others. But I think that's like a common denominator in a lot of the experiences of marginalized people, right? When you grow up with the media, with movies, with society telling you that like you're less than, then you know like your sense of self kicks in, and you're like, well, actually, I am worthy. I am, you know, like I am valued.
Yeah, that's why sometimes we overcompensate with large words, right?
Guilty.
I'm guilty of that too, all the time. Just trying to, you know, just add the extra, I can't even think of a word right now, but trying to add the extra level of intelligence into a conversation. But dude, you really are a fucking bright human being and very intelligent. And after high school, you went where?
I went to Brown University.
Fucking Brown University. That's not a joke.
It was, you know, like.
That's fucking badass, dude.
Well, I mean, like I said, I was a nerd in high school.
Yeah.
I focused on my GPA. I did all the extracurriculars. And going back to this mentorship thing, one of my teachers in my junior year in high school, Mr. Lopez, I'll never forget him. I was in his AP history class. You know, and I was doing well in the class. And he had grown up in Salinas. He went to the same high school. He went to Brown for grad school. And he was the one that was like, hey, you're doing really well in school. There's this school called Brown that you should look into. I don't know what the fuck Brown was.
Of course.
I just knew that.
How are you going to know?
I just knew that somebody that I looked up to
told
me this is something you should look into.
Yeah.
So when I was applying for colleges in my senior year, you know, I applied to a bunch of schools in California, very few in the East Coast, and I applied to Brown on a whim. Just because my teacher told me to, Mr. Lopez told me to. And I got in. And I got in with heavy financial aid because my parents at the time were janitors. You know, like they could not afford to pay for that tuition.
Of course, yeah.
So I got in, and without even visiting the campus, I accepted it. I was just
Did you know to bring a jacket?
No, dude. The first winter there,
Oh my
I had gone to the Burlington Coat Factory in San Jose.
Oh my God.
And I bought this little fucking jacket.
Oh, you thought
I
you
was
were
like,
good.
that's my winter coat.
Oh my
Once the
God.
winter hit, I didn't know what to expect.
Dude, that's hilarious. I mean, I'm sorry, but
No, I mean, I didn't know. I didn't know what cold was. I didn't know what snow was. That was the first time I saw snow in my life.
what a trip.
You know, but like, and that even there was a trip.
Yeah.
Because like when I was there at Brown, it was a very diverse campus ethnically. But you got a lot of people of color who are like kids of professionals with money.
Yeah.
With money.
Yeah.
So even though they're brown,
Sons and daughters of doctors and lawyers.
doctors and lawyers.
Engineers.
So like when I first got there, I met all these brown kids, but they were like not from my fucking side of the world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
So being there, I was one of the few scholarship kids. So that shit was, talk about a mind fuck. You know, coming from East Salinas, going to school where like you see people driving Benzos, Porsches, vacationing in the Bahamas, like, and there I am eating fucking canned tuna in Thanksgiving because I don't have money to fly home.
Can't fly home, yep.
It's too expensive.
Damn.
You know, so it was one of those things where like I don't regret it. It's opened up opportunities, but those 4 years were fucking tough.
Yeah.
You know, it was like seeing that divide, and like I was angry. I was angry as hell because I was like, life is not fair. Look how these motherfuckers did.
So you finished there.
I finished.
Got your degree in?
in U.S. history.
Wow.
And I graduated with honors because, again, there I was, immigrant kid trying to prove
I'm
themselves.
going to show you, motherfucker. Just,
I was like, yeah. And, you know, in my mind, I had like this. It was like Hiram and Owen. I was like, motherfuckers, like, I'm worth it, you know?
Bastards.
You know? But, you know, that's no way to live.
How does that affect you now, like those kind of things?
I mean, I'm to the point now where, like, I've learned not to try to prove myself to anyone other than myself. Like, I still work hard. I'm still a workaholic. Yeah. I'm still an overachiever. But it's not because I want to prove myself to anyone. It's more like I have the drive to push myself, you know? So I think all those experiences growing up in Salinas, going to an Ivy League, like, it taught me to hustle, you know? Like, because I saw my parents hustle. You know, I saw my parents hustle hard.
Dude, I mean, like in my mind, I just picture one of the best experiences ever that you went through for that. I don't know how it was for you, but I could imagine that going to an Ivy League university for 4 years and bringing that back home with you had to be pretty awesome, or I don't know if it was traumatic.
I mean, honestly, the 4 years were pretty traumatic, but there was something really special when I graduated, you know, with honors, with a special sash. And my parents who, like, didn't study beyond middle school went out for my graduation. I had a professor who was this Chinese-American woman who taught ethnic studies. And she was like, your parents can stay with me because I know it's expensive. So my parents flew out there.
Wow.
And, you know, for, like, my parents to see me up on the stage, to get my diploma.
Wow.
You know, it was a big deal.
Of course.
It was a big deal for them.
Of course.
And I think that's when my mom laid off being a Mexican tiger mom because, like, I was like, I told her, like, see, I did everything that you asked me to do. Now it's my time to live my life.
See, well, then that was your second motivation was your mom, you know, or your initial motivation was probably your mom. What a trip. And so you finished and still you come home and you're like, I want to try to do some more.
Well, when I graduated from college, dude, I was in a deep sort of anti-capitalist bohemian phase where I was like, fuck careers, fuck the rat race. I spent 2.5 years backpacking.
What?
And I just lived out of a backpack. And, like, if it didn't fit in my backpack, I didn't need it in my life. And I don't regret that. Like, a lot of my friends started their careers.
That's something that I'm looking at like, wow, like, I wish I could do that as well. Like, that's fucking amazing, dude.
Honestly, it was just one of those things where, like, I always used to joke that I had, like, a preemptive midlife crisis. When I graduated from college, I was like, I had all these existential doubts. And I was like, really, do I want to go live for a 9-to-5?
It probably gave you, like, some kind of, like, culture clash, I guess, in a way, where because you had lived your entire life here, you went to live those 4 years intensely over there, and when you came back, you just maybe couldn't find where you fit in, or?
Absolutely. I think I was also scared shitless about what to do with my life, you know? Like,
were you already doing art at this point?
I made art since I could pick up a pen and paper.
Okay.
I made art, you know, but, like, there was no arts education in my high school. There was, like, one art class. I took that one art class, and that was it. That's all there was. And, of course, like, I would tell my mom when I was in college, I was like, oh, I want to study art. She's like, that's not a real job. Get a real job. So, of course, like a good immigrant kid, I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. But I took, like, a art class my senior year at Brown.
I was going to say, like, you guys get to go to RISD, right?
And I was like, fuck, I chose the wrong major. You know, my senior year. But, like, actually, I had this amazing professor named Josie Salanya, who's this Chicana scholar. And she was, like, one of the few.
At RISD?
At Brown.
Brown.
And she was one of the few, like, Latinx scholars that I met. And I took this Chicano literature course with her.
Okay, not an art.
Not an art class. It was a literature course. But I credit her for starting me on my path because, you know, our midterm was an essay. We had to write the essay, traditional. But for the final project, she was like, I want you all to do an art project. Since we're studying art, like, I want you to take everything you learn and make a piece of art. And so I made a painting, typical Chicano painting. I did a loteria card.
I was going to say Frida Kahlo meets.
It was like loteria card with all these like Chicano icons.
Okay.
And like I love that assignment. I was
Yeah.
like, damn, I like this more than writing essays.
Yeah.
But I didn't trust that. Like I doubted myself like a motherfucker.
Yeah, of course.
I was like, I'm not good enough to do that. I'm not an artist.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a writer. I convinced myself.
But maybe also you weren't yet aware of what the art world was,
I
so
had
you
no
couldn't see
exposure to
anything.
it. Yeah,
you
sometimes,
couldn't
like,
see, you couldn't visualize like what you could do with that, right?
I had no conception of what a career in art could be.
Mm.
I had no conception of what that could be. It was, to me,
It's really
it was
interesting, man, because I was thinking all day today how you are like someone that is extremely, I mean, gifted and talented in your art, at the same time, like highly academic in your work.
yeah.
So it's crazy how these things like met.
Yeah, I mean, like,
I mean, the art was always in you,
it was always there.
but the academia brought it out.
Yeah, I mean, like, shit, I have a research-based practice, right? Like,
Yeah.
I go into archives, I read books, I read theory, and then I make a body of work based on that. It's very nerdy. I make very nerdy art,
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah,
okay with that. Like, there's room for everything in the art world.
But
you know?
it's extremely nerdy, but at the same time, it's very accessible.
I try, yeah.
Like anybody can see it and appreciate it without having to, figure anything out. Now, if you do figure out, you can understand it deeper, but you can, on the surface level, just look at it and appreciate it.
Well, there's layers to it, you know.
That's what
Like
I'm saying,
I always like, it's gonna sound probably pragmatic, but like I make art that I want to show to my dad. You know, my dad finished 6th grade, and then they told him, "There's no money in this house for you to study. If you want to eat in this house, you gotta work." And like, you know, growing up, like my dad was into the Vaquero comics, you know, El Libro Vaquero.
Yeah.
He would read that shit. He had stacks of it.
Oh, shit.
Right? And so like when I first started making art, I was like, well, what does it mean for working class communities to have an access point to art? You know, to tell our stories, but to do it in a way where like I can leverage sort of like fine art practices, but do it in a way where I can show it to my dad and he might be like, oh, okay, I get that. You know? Yeah. And it's not to say he can't be sophisticated, but he doesn't have a college degree. He doesn't read theory.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think, yeah. I mean, I understand all that. I was trying to give another, I was thinking like how a bottle of wine, like anybody can drink a bottle of wine and enjoy it, but some people might understand like the little details and intricacies that go deep into the drinking. That's another story of alcoholism.
We can go there. We can go there if you want.
No, I want to get more into how you developed like your style, your specific style. Like, I mean, so you didn't do any of this kind of print work or any of that when you were young. You are now a college graduate. You're out of Brown. You backpack, and then you apply for a doctorate program too.
Yeah, because there was still that part of me that was like...
What was the doctorate program in?
It was in American Studies and Ethnicity, which is basically ethnic studies at USC. And I applied there. Moved here to LA in 2008 to go to school there. And I mean, I love the intellectual labor of grad school, but I saw where it was taking me, and I was like, this life isn't for me. And when I was there, I made it to what they call the ABD phase, all but dissertation. But all my research was like straight up on comic books and visual media.
Wow.
I had like a certificate in visual studies. I did Latin American cultural studies, doing all this cultural theory. And again, I had an amazing professor, Kara Keeling, who was a cinema scholar. She's like this Black radical feminist, and I was writing this essay on comic books, and she was like, I know you're an artist, like instead of writing an essay, why don't you make a comic book about what you're reading?
Wow.
And I love this so much. Like, I worked so hard on it. 3 weeks, I neglected all my other assignments.
Wow.
Like, at that point, my drawing was really rusty because I had stopped making art for a long time.
Yeah.
But I made a comic book about comic books and the theories I was reading.
Wow.
And that was like, it planted the seed in my head where I was like, I love this way more than I do, like, writing a text that's, like, super pedantic and, like, trying to prove how smart I am to other scholars. And my heart wasn't in it.
But it all comes from the same place of wanting to teach or to share or to explain.
Yeah, man. Like, you know, I've been in education for over 20 years now.
Yeah.
You know? And basically in 2011, I got my master's. And I knew I was going to get out of there. And I dropped out of school. I went through a horrible depression because there I was.
Wait,
like,
so you didn't get your master's, or you did?
I got my master's, but I didn't finish the PhD.
Oh, the PhD, that's right.
I didn't finish the PhD.
Yeah.
I bounced out of there.
It's one of those programs where you apply for the PhD, but you can leave at the master's.
You get your master's along the way once you finish your coursework and your exams. And I left the program, and I was in a horrible depression. And my ex was like, "You really like art? You should take an art class." And of course, I'm a hater. I was like, "I'm not an artist." And she was like, "No, there's this printmaking class at the Center for Art in Eagle Rock. You should take it."
Right.
And I was like, "I don't know." She's like, "I'll pay for it. Just go. Get out of the house. You're depressed." And I took this intro to printmaking workshop at Center for Arts. And the first lino cut, I was hooked.
Do you remember who taught it?
Jonah Fernandez Olsen.
Wow.
He's like this dude who's like who's like part Tongva, and he was like teaching like basic printmaking. But from the very first lino cut, I was hooked. I was hooked. I was like, I love this. I want to do it.
Crazy.
And so like I started.
If you could remember, I mean, if you could try to explain like when you cut, or was it when you cut, or was it when you saw the finished piece?
The whole process, man. Like, I'm a very impatient person. I painted for years. I have to say I'm not a very good painter. I'm not, and I'm okay with that. But like, I would get frustrated. I would rush. I'd make all these mistakes. And in printmaking, I'm gonna get philosophical here. Printmaking is all about the process, and it taught me so much about life. To stop worrying about the finished product and enjoy where you are at the moment. You know what I mean?
It's all about the journey.
It's all about that journey. And in printmaking, if you rush, you're going to fuck up your block. You're going to make a lazy mistake, and then you're going to be frustrated and start all over, and maybe you spent 2 weeks working on it, and it's all down the drain. So, like, I love the drawing because I love to draw. I love the carving. The carving is meditative. Like, you have to have full awareness and presence in where your hands are, where it's going, how much pressure you're putting, when you're going to stop, when you're going to start. And that like hooked me because I realized it was like a form of presence that I can't access regularly. And of course, like the magical part is when you ink that shit, run it through the press, and you pull your first print, and you're like, oh shit, I made that. You know? That was what hooked me. And then I started selling my prints at Caracol Marketplace at Trópico de Nopal. And I was just slanging basic prints. And then, you know, Maestro Dewey Tafoya was vending shirts there. Because, you know, he's a master printmaker.
Yeah.
He saw my prints and he was like, hey, you should come to Self-Help Graphics. If you're really into this, you should check this place out. And I had heard of Self-Help Graphics, but I was intimidated. I was like, oh, no, that's where real artists go. Like, I'm just like I'm janky ass printmaker.
Yeah, everybody starts somewhere.
And I started going to Self-Help Graphics, and I started going to the print studio, and I just kept showing up.
What an example of like just take that first step, you know, like because you're trying to see like, oh, I'm not an artist because I'm not in museums. Is what you're thinking. I'm not an artist, but if you just take that first step.
Yeah, that's what I always tell my
Taking that
students
class.
now. Like, don't be afraid to just like try, and if you suck at first, it's okay. Like, you know, like what is it? That guy Malcolm Gladwell who's like, 10,000 hours to master something. Like, I don't know if the formula is right, but definitely if you devote yourself to something long enough, you pick up skills along the way.
Yeah.
And just showing up, like I credit Self-Help Graphics. That place opened up a world to me.
Yeah.
And to the point where when Joel Garcia was there,
Yeah.
he was just like, hey, like, you really love this. Like, we'll make a deal. Like, well, you can use a print studio, bring your paper, bring your ink, and whatever you print there, just give us 20% of the prints to sell, and you keep the rest.
Yeah.
So I was like,
Hell yeah.
bonus, I have access to a studio now. And I met Victor Rosas,
Yeah.
who's like, you know, he's a homie,
Yeah.
and we hit it off, and he was like my first teacher.
Another lover of printmaking. And
Yeah, he, you know, he's great at printmaking, and he taught me so much. He'd be like, you know, like I would pull a print, and it wasn't very good, and he's like, the print's gonna talk to you. Like, just listen to it. It's gonna talk to you. It's gonna tell you this is what you could have done better.
Ese viejito sabe lo
This is
todo.
un pinche sabio.
Sabio, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Oh, that's so cool, dude. Man, I remember when I first met you. Now we can get back to that. When I first met you, you were there. You had a little table and you had a bunch of prints, and you were actually talking a lot about your experience with your drug problems. I guess I could put it into that, right?
Yeah.
And I know that had a lot to do with the beginning of your experience with all this printmaking. And in the beginning, you were doing a lot of that kind of work, right? How did that evolve?
I was making some trippy shit because, like, for the longest time, you know, I made art forever, but I never showed it to anybody. It was just for me. It was a cathartic exercise to get out my demons, you know, because I'm like, I have a mental illness. I have bipolar disorder, and it was undiagnosed until 2015. So, you know, I was going through all these things, didn't know how to process them, and my art was my release. So I was making some dark shit, like reflecting on my addictions, reflecting on my depression, on this like self-hate that I had. And, you know, for a while, that's the art that I made because it was for me.
Yeah.
It was for me. So probably when you met me, I was in that phase where I was like...
You were so young. I mean, you're still very young, but you were so young and so excited and immediately just, like, caught my attention because of how much you loved the process of printmaking. And you just explained everything away of all of your pieces. And I just remember how excited you were, more than anything, about what you were doing, that you were like actually doing art and that you were actually
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah,
I couldn't believe it.
I could totally see that, and I could totally see that in you. And I tripped now because I remember that, and now I see you like, you know, you're a professor at USC.
Yeah. I know, dude. I still trip out on that.
Yeah, I love it. And then your growth. I mean, let's get into like after self-help graphics, you've done a lot of shows and residencies.
Yeah, well, at self-help, I got this commission, and I got a residency at self-help when Joel Garcia was there. And I produced like a body of prints based on my PhD studies. And I try to tell the story of a fictionalized, half fiction, half biographical story based on like my grandpa and my dad, because my dad was undocumented. I try to tell the story of an immigrant through 12 images. Not the story, a story, right? Because there's no one story of migration.
Yeah.
And I try to incorporate everything I had learned, but the whole idea was to try to tell a story just through images. Again, because I was interested in comic books, right? Like how visual media can be narrative-based just through images. And I made that body of work. And like that was the springboard. Like I used that as my portfolio to apply to an MFA. And I got into a few programs, but I ended up at Cal State Long Beach because they have a printmaking program, and I wanted to learn printmaking. Because I had been a self-taught artist, I was like, I want to know the proper way of doing a print. I want to learn screen printing, etching, lithography, all these techniques that seem so like difficult and impossible. And I used that portfolio to get into the school. And I spent 3 years there getting my ass kicked because I was going to school with motherfuckers who had BFAs, who had like gone to arts high schools, had like studied art in college.
Been training for years by the time they get to their MFA.
By the time they get to the MFA, they have their skills set. They're just conceptually exploring. I spent the first 2 years just learning basics. You know, like, and I think it's funny, like I never had one good critique in grad school. Never one critique where someone was like, oh, that looks good, you just didn't right. Because I was always like learning, right? And the funny thing is, like, I'm still incorporating lessons from grad school in my work now.
Wow.
I went to Cal State Long Beach this weekend, and I ran into one of my professors who did, like, my last semester there. And she gave me this feedback back in, like, 2019, right? Because I graduated right in the pandemic, start of the pandemic. And in 2019, I was doing critiques with her, and she gave me this one comment that, like, 2 years later, I'm still working on that one comment based on that feedback. You know what I mean? So it was one of those things where, like, it was a tough experience because, like, talk about insecurities, right? Like, when you're, like, self-taught and then you're in an MFA program, like, that was intimidating. I think what helped me is, like, I had read a lot of theory in my PhD program, so I could read theory. That didn't scare me. I could do that. I could do that all day. It was incorporating that into my artwork, you know. But I had, like, amazing professors there who would, like, push me and who gave me feedback. And, like, one of my favorite things about Long Beach is, like, it's a underrated art school. It's a state school. It's super affordable.
We've had so many artists in here from Long Beach. Like, Long Beach kicks ass.
Dude, it's a good program.
Yeah.
It's a good program. It's affordable. It's, like, it's very diverse student body.
I love it.
And one of my favorite things, like, in our grad critiques, it wasn't just printmakers. It was, like, painters, sculptors, fiber artists, metal artists, woodworking artists. And so you absorb all that, the vocabulary, you absorb all the techniques, you absorb all these different strategies. And that's why, like, even now when I teach printmaking, I don't teach traditional printmaking. I do, like, interdisciplinary printmaking, where, like, I'm pushing the students to be like, learn how to do a print, but then break the rules. Learn the rules so you can break them.
Yeah.
You know, learn the rules so you can say you know how to do a print, but then go nuts. Like, don't worry about the 2D plane on a rectangular piece of paper. Like, go nuts.
Yeah. That's awesome. So now what's up with you? Where do you want to take all this now?
Well, I mean, life has a weird way of, like, sending you in weird directions. Like, I work at a museum now, you know? So, like, my day job is doing, like, administrative stuff.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, you know, it's hard to live off of your art. It's hard. Like, to actually, like, have a living wage as an artist, it's hard. So I made I have a son, I have an 8, soon to be 9-year-old. And, you know, esa pinche vida de bohemio, like, I couldn't, like, I was, you know, a year and a half ago, I was on food stamps, unemployment, and having my Medi-Cal benefits, like, randomly cut off for no reason. And just struggling, dude, struggling. So I made the decision to say I needed a straight job. I needed a 9-to-5. And I got really lucky. I ended up at the Getty Museum because I had, you know, my grad degrees, I had nonprofit experience. So that's my day job. In the evenings I teach, and when I'm not doing that, I'm working on my side projects. Like right now I got a project with the LA County Department of Arts and Culture, working on, it's my 3rd public art project.
What is that going to be?
It's going to be in La Puente.
Okay.
It's a mural at a community center.
Nice.
And it's going to be like a print-inspired mural.
Nice.
And then I got a show coming up in April at Flux Art Space in Long Beach.
Okay.
It's a small little gallery that shows a lot of Cal State alum. So I'm still got my foot in the art world, but I'm kind of doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah, at one point you started your own, I guess you want to call it, print studio?
It's still like, it's dormant, but it's still there. It's called Hali Print Studio.
Okay. And tell us about that, or what's going on there.
Well, you know, one of the great traditions about printmaking is, like, you got this, like, this notion of, like, this collective workspace. And one of the things I like about printmaking, it can be very collaborative. And so I have this dream, if I can, like, have the bandwidth and the time to, like, work with other artists who don't know printmaking to do fine art prints with them. And, you know, like, with my printmaking experience, I could work out the technique. Yeah. But, like, working with other artists, like, right now I'm doing...
To print their work.
To print their work. Right now I'm doing this collaborative print with this young Chicano from Arizona named Edgar Fernandez. He's, like, drawing the blocks, and then I carve them and print them.
Damn.
And that's really fun because like it takes all the pressure off drawing.
Yeah.
You just like you take the block and
then it
you
takes
just
all the
carve
pressure
it.
off of him of carving.
Exactly, because
Just
he doesn't know it.
hard
So it's
part.
like a win-win situation. And we're gonna like split the edition. He's gonna have a show in Arizona. He's gonna go up there. But I've had to like kind of table that for now because I
Yeah.
got so much going on. Like this public art project has been going on for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And like I'm still working on the final renderings to get them approved.
Those jobs, those public art jobs, it gets difficult sometimes because you're like, oh man, I'm getting X amount of dollars to create art. But then you don't realize at first how long it's going to drag on and
long
how much hours you're going to put in and how much you have to invest in other things to actually finish the product.
It's crazy. I mean,
At the end, you're getting like,
you don't make that much money off of it because like right now
Sucks.
with the county I have to pay for insurance. I'm paying like I have insurance coverage, but I did do like another public art project with Caltrans, and that was lucrative because like I was partnering with some faculty at LA Trade Tech with like these landscape architects, and we co-created a green space.
that's dope.
And it was all like, all they had to do was like look at a print of mine. They're like, we like that. Can you do a design? So I did the design and they digitized it. They did all the CAD files. We made this 300-foot sculpture off the 110 freeway.
Where is it?
It's off of 28th Street near the Department of Social Services, right behind it. It's like this weird pocket park overlooking the 110 freeway. And that was like my first public art
I
project.
gotta go look at that.
And like right now I'm putting in bids for other public art projects. I do enjoy it.
So being somebody that was like, when you first left Brown and you were like, like fuck money and capitalism and everything, and I'm just gonna backpack. Like, how do you like compare that to like now balancing, making money and making art? And how do you? I mean, since we could get philosophical or whatever about like how do you balance art and money, or how do you separate them?
It's tricky, dude. Like, I my boss is really cool, and sometimes I'll straight up tell her, like, I kind of feel like a sellout. Because I, like 20-something-year-old me would probably look at me and be like, what the fuck are you doing, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like living under capitalism, coming from a background where my parents don't have money, like, I hate to use the word pragmatic, but I'm like, I want to provide for my son. I want to give him a better life than I had. And so if that means putting on a dress shirt and going speaking professional talk, so I could do that. I mean, I also like, it's been very liberating to have 2 jobs, 2 incomes where my needs are met, because now I can make the art that I want to make. I don't have to worry about, is it going to sell?
Yeah.
Because like I've sold a lot of art enough to like justify my practice. But in the back of my mind, and this is the pressure that a lot of artists face, is it going to sell? Is it marketable, right? You can't escape it. You can't escape capitalism. It surrounds you. It's like, like, I don't want to use a Matrix reference, but, like, you're in it. Right?
Yeah.
And so, like, it was easy for me to try to exist at the margins of capitalism when I didn't have a young person relying on me. Right? Now, once my son was born, like, a switch flipped. I was like, well, I can't give him a bohemian life because, like, that's not fair to him, So, right now I'm making art that I really enjoy. Is it going to sell? I don't know. But I'm not making it, again, to prove myself to anyone.
Because you're already...
I can pay my bills.
Yeah, you can pay your bills.
I can make something that's experimental, conceptual.
Yeah.
It's still political.
Yeah. And that's a much better feeling in the end, right? When you just get something out of your system that is probably growing in you, you create something, you make it, you let it out, and you don't have to worry about selling it.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I still want to sell it. Like shit. Like I got car notes to pay. I got student loans to pay. I want to sell it, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't sell, I'm gonna be okay. And that's a very privileged thing to say that I couldn't say even 2 years ago.
Yeah. God damn it, money. What else would you like to share with us that we haven't talked about?
I don't know, like I think we talked before we started this about the name of your podcast, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
I feel like my journey into sobriety has been in the background of all of this stuff we've been talking about. Like when I was in high school, I didn't drink, I didn't smoke weed because in my mind I was like, that's going to stop me from getting out of here. But once I got to college, started experimenting, smoking a little weed, trying this, trying that. And when I was backpacking, I went nuts, man.
Oh, really?
I went nuts.
Wow.
Like, I'm talking like...
I would imagine that was more of a not doing drugs time, but I guess it is.
Oh, no, dude.
Wow.
I was in a self-destruct mode, especially when you think so little of yourself and you're depressed and you want to annihilate yourself. And you find these drugs.
You were on that journey for a different reason. And you were on that journey to
escape.
Yeah, escape.
I was on that journey to escape, and I think like right now it's cost me, like sobriety, como dice en español, me ha costado un huevo. Like it's because like I remember when I took that first hit of weed, I was like, oh my God, I can actually relax because I was so high strung. I had insomnia since I was 11.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because like there was a lot of money stress in my house.
Yeah.
And my parents would, it was a very stressful environment. And I remember I tried weed for the first time. I was high for 7 days straight. Wow. I thought it was the greatest thing ever. I was like, how could I not smoke before? And, it started off gradual in the weekends.
It makes you feel so smart.
In the evenings. And then it turned into an all-day thing. And I remember in college, two of my best friends were also stoners. And we kind of fell into potheadedness together. And I remember there was this time where we were in our dorm. The dorms there are super old. We were in our dorm, and we decided we were going to hotbox the closet.
Damn.
And the closet was big enough for 3 of us to put a mattress in there and sit on the mattress. Yeah. We rolled 3 joints for each of us. And we're like, we're going to hotbox this shit. We're going to get toasted. we smoke, hotbox it. Estamos todos like with the red eyes. We open the door. Fucking fire alarm goes off.
What?
Beep, 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 beep. 2 in the morning.
Wait,
2 in the morning.
What school was this at?
This is at Brown.
At Brown.
2 in the morning, alarm goes off.
Oh, God.
And my friend, thinking he was all sly, he was this dude from Texas, opens the door into the hallway. Everybody's in the hallway because the fire alarm is going off, and somebody yells, "It's just the stoners down the hall." And I was like, fuck, dude. And at that point, it was a point of pride. I was like, yeah, I'm a stoner. I don't care about your bullshit. And that opened up. I mean, I'm not saying it was a gateway drug, but it definitely was a gateway for me. Yeah. Once I tried weed, I tried all the hard stuff. Damn. You name it, I tried it. Damn. And that started this spiral.
This is all at school?
This is all at school, but I kind of had it under control at school. Once I graduated from college, I was like, I got no responsibilities. Like, I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed of it. Yeah. I tried ecstasy, meth, coke, you name it. And it was exhilarating. Yeah. It made you feel good, Trip. It made you feel good. And so, like, those 2.5 years traveling, progressively, I got deeper and deeper and deeper into my addiction to the point where I was going on 3-day benders with no food, just cigarettes and alcohol and all the uppers I could find. And that pretty much continued up until 2015. Even when I was in the PhD program, I was deep in my addiction. Damn. Still being functional, right? Wow. But not being okay. Yeah. And like in 2015, I hit my lowest point. I had a suicide attempt. I was deep in my addiction, abusing medication, abusing everything I could get my hands on. I was like a vacuum.
Somebody left their bathroom, their pills in the bathroom.
Dude, I was abusing Vicodin, fucking benzos, like weed, alcohol. And in 2015, I tried to kill myself. And I ended up at LA County USC Medical Center. Damn. And that was a dark experience, dude. Like, being in there with, like, really the disposables of society. I had no insurance, so that's the only hospital I could go to. They treat the people there like shit.
Yeah, it's like a
Straight
jail.
up. It's like a jail for the mentally ill.
Yeah.
And I was put into rehab. And I went through rehab, and I hated every step of it. I was like, fuck these meetings, fuck the 12 steps. I don't believe in this shit. I don't need this. But that was an eye-opener for me. That was like my first taste of sobriety, where I realized, damn, I've been really fucking myself up.
Did you slowly like become aware of that?
Man, I knew even in college, I knew that I was out of control.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't, like, I almost didn't make it. I mean, I don't know how I did it with the grades that I did in college, because, like, I was, like, abusing fucking Adderall. Damn. Like, I would, like, snort a couple of lines of Adderall, smoke a bowl, and write an A essay.
Damn. Because you were just a brilliant motherfucker,
I don't
bro.
know about that. I was deep in my
That's
addiction.
how easy it was for you.
But, like I said, 2015 was, like, a before and after point.
Yeah. I think that's around, I had met you after your suicide attempt.
Yeah.
I remember because you talked to us about it. I can't imagine, like, what you had gone through or what you went through over there, but I'm glad that it was, like, past. How did you separate it, or how did you move forward? Or
I think, well, it's been a gradual journey, dude.
Yeah.
Like
every day,
right? Like, and I had to learn the hard way. Yeah. Because I would always, like a true addict, I kept bargaining. Like, oh, I can just smoke every once in a while, or I can just drink every once in a while. Yeah. But time after time, relapse after relapse, having a little bit of sobriety, relapsing, a little bit of sobriety, relapsing, I realized I really can't do this anymore. This is not working. The weed doesn't even make me feel good anymore. And, like, no shade on people who could smoke weed and function.
Same.
No shade. If you can do it, I'm jealous. I can't.
When I stopped drinking, and people would be like, come on, you could have just one. I was like, no, I can't. And you don't understand it until you understand it yourself, until you go through something like that. And if you can't stop at one, then it's better not to have that one, not to have that first.
Well, I just learned the hard way, like, during the pandemic, my drinking got out of control. Damn. Like a lot of people, I had nowhere to go. I was scared, facing my own mortality, stressed out. I didn't have a job. No money, food stamps and unemployment. So what I do, I just drink. And that's when I realized not only am I a pothead, not only am I an addict, I'm also an alcoholic. Yeah. Right? So it was like this gradual process. And, like that is like, that's the behind the scenes, right? Like, it's very easy to be like, oh, I went through these struggles. Oh, look, I excelled academically. Yeah. But in the background, ever since I was 18 years old, I was an addict. Yeah. I was an addict. As soon as I got my first taste of alcohol, I remember my first time I got drunk, I was a freshman in college, and this friend of mine had a real ID that happened to be from this other person that looked like him. So he could buy, handles of Bacardi and shit. Damn. I remember first time I drank, I ended up chugging a bottle of Bacardi, being like, I love getting drunk. It was like, from day one, those alcoholic tendencies came out. Yeah. But it was gradual. And it's to the point now where I'm 100% sober. Right, and it's a trip to say that, because I never wanted to be sober. I wanted so badly to be the functioning user. Yeah.
That's another thing too. I didn't know I was going to be sober until I just decided to be sober one day. And it was like that. Like, my body was actually telling me, like, I'm gonna die if I don't fucking stop drinking at that age. And so you don't want, I don't know, but you don't. I didn't know I was going to be sober until it finally happened. And nobody could have told me, like, to stop drinking. I had to, like, finally do it. But I can't imagine the weight of addiction from other substances, I mean, I was just alcohol. I smoked, but only when I drank. Yeah. So, if alcohol was, like, my mom used to call alcohol my wife. you know, it's like, estás con tu vieja. Yeah. And, yeah, I can't imagine the weight of all these other substances, like, you know, calling on you or whatever. And yeah, just crazy to be able to move forward, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, I know it's a taboo subject still.
Well, I know that you've been completely open about this.
And that's why I'm
from the
transparent
beginning.
about it.
Yeah,
'Cause
you've always been.
There's no shame about it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's fucking life.
It's life and it's real. You know, like,
Yeah.
I'm not coming out here bragging, oh, I got so fucked up. But I really fucking put myself to the edge, dude.
Yeah.
Push, like, going on binges for 3 or 4 days, no sleep, no food, just doing lines and chain smoking and pushing myself to the edge constantly.
So what do you think, like, helped you, like, pull yourself out of it, if you can?
I mean, honestly, community, right? Like, I had to reinvent my friends once I got sober.
Yeah, I tell people that I had to relearn how to socialize in a different way. All of my friends were still my friends, but I had to, like, figure out different ways to hang out with them. To keep them friends, right?
Because it's such a socially acceptable, especially now with what fucked me up was the legalization of marijuana. Because as soon as I could get my medical card, I got anxiety. I need to medicate it. And of course, the doctors, here you go, here's your medical card. And then I tried to give up weed, and they legalized it. And the dispensaries were right there open.
Fucking down the
and me, like a real pothead, being like, oh, let's check out the deal. What's going on?
And at the same time, this is not to knock it for people that can handle it.
Yeah,
There's people that can function all day with this shit.
Man, there's a lot of people who can smoke a joint, go to do their job and function. Me, if I smoke a joint on a Sunday, Monday morning, I'm gonna wake and bake, and then I can't stop. I can't stop, and then all my money goes to it. I get paranoid. I get anxious. It doesn't even chill me out anymore. I'm just paranoid and freaked out, but I can't stop.
Yeah.
You know, like all the other hard shit that I messed around with. Like I saw the train wreck, and I was like, I gotta stop. Like, you know, like not to glamorize it. When I was traveling, I started doing coke socially, and I probably shouldn't talk about this in a public forum, but there's no shame. And you know, all my friends were into it, doing speed, and I remember in my mind I would be like, well, this is a social thing. I only do it to socialize and connect with people. And then one day I was in a club, in a bathroom, taking bumps off my key because I didn't want to share it, hiding in the bathroom. And that's when I was like,
it's not social anymore.
This is not social anymore. I'm running away from something.
You
know? And I'm very open about that because I think, like, there's a lot of stigma about it. There's a lot of shame around it. You know, there's still this narrative in society that if you fall into addiction, somehow you're a personal failure, right? And so that's why I'm transparent about it, because I think, like, especially a lot of young people, you know, it's a fucking crazy world right now. Politically, socially, economically.
And drugs are fucked up right now.
Drugs are fucked up.
The shit that people are putting in it is fucking a lot of people up.
And no judgment, because I've done some questionable things. You know, I've done some questionable things, but like, I'm always very transparent about that, because if I can, like, share my story and somebody is like, oh, I know what that's like, then that hopefully is a source of hope. Not to say that I'm an inspiration, but just to be like, you're not the only one going through this.
What do you think is the first step for somebody that's feeling like, I got to get the fuck out of this, you know, place that I'm in? I got to find my way towards sobriety. What do you think would be the first step for something like that? Because I can't tell people how to be sober. People ask me all the time, and I just don't know how to fucking do it, because I just did it from one day to the next.
I think it looks different for every person. You know? I don't think there's like this one prescription. Be like, do A, B, and C, and you're gonna be sober. For me, I had to hit rock bottom, and that rock bottom was trying to kill myself. You know? That was my rock bottom. And even then, after hitting rock bottom, it took me years to actually stay sober. Because, like, I resisted. Especially, like, in the 12-step model, you know, there's all this talk of God. I grew up in the church, super Catholic. And I had a horrible experience with the Catholic Church. And so when I would hear God, I'd be like, get the fuck out of here with your God shit, right? And so that to me was a major turnoff.
Yeah, I hated the AAs so much. Just hated them.
Yeah.
But I only went to a couple. But
Yeah, it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. But, like, you know, like, one thing that I learned was, like, you take what works for you.
yeah,
And the good thing about, I will say this about
works
the
for a lot of
12-step
people.
model,
yeah,
you don't have to believe in God. You just have to believe in something bigger than yourself.
yeah,
That bigger than yourself could be your community.
yeah. Because not to knock AA, but I hated it. But it works for so many people.
I mean, it's one of the most effective
Because it
sobriety
also
programs.
it's community for them too. Like it's community, it's support, it's so many things for a lot of people. So not to knock it at all.
But it's not for everybody too. Like I would say if you are coming to a realization that you have an addiction issue,
Yeah,
like connect with people, because
Yeah.
sometimes addicts were really good at isolating, creating our own little world,
yeah,
and not looking outside of that.
yeah.
And once you start connecting with other people who are like, hey, I fucked myself up too,
Yeah.
then you don't feel like a failure.
Yeah.
Then you can work through the shame
Yeah.
and be like, oh, there's other people who have
Community
gone
of
through
people.
it,
Yep.
right? And so that to me is the key.
Yeah.
What that community looks like can be different, right?
For everybody,
There's indigenous sobriety practices that are not about God and the 12 steps. They exist, you know? There's sobriety circles.
Yeah.
And so, like, whatever works for you,
It's
just, like, go for it.
It's crazy that for a podcast called Dancing Sober that it took this many episodes to get to an actual conversation about sobriety.
That's why I asked you about it, because I was so intrigued. Like,
But because of that, I'm going to put some links below for sobriety programs and for suicide hotlines. So check the links below. Dude, thank you so much for sharing and for being so open. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Any shout outs? You want to mention a future show or something?
well, I have my show at Flux Art Space in Long Beach, opening Saturday, April 22nd.
There it is.
There's
Next
going to be some weird mixed media pieces, some sculptures, and an installation. That's my only real shout out. Other than that, thanks for having me over, man.
And let us have your website and your social media so people can follow you.
My Instagram handle is at Alvaro D. Marquez, ALVARODMARQUEZ. And my website is alvarodmarquez.com. And you can find my projects. I have a store. I sell my print because I'm still trying to hustle.
Yeah. Thank you again so much for being so open and sharing. There's a question that we ask everybody at the end of each podcast, and I don't explain it anymore. Mm-hmm. And I only ask that it's a very vague question. I ask that you try. The challenge is to try to answer in one sentence. Mm-hmm. So, Alvaro Marquez, how do you do it?
I just wake up every day and try to do my best that I can one day at a time.
Boom.
Whether it's my art, whether it's my sobriety, whether it's my profession, whether it's my relationships, one day at a time, doing the best that I can.
There it is. The famous one day at a time. Un día a la vez. All right. Thank you very much, bro. We appreciate your time, man. We'll see you guys next week.